Hey friends, I'm Otis Gibbs, and this is Keith Sykes. He's going to share a great story about his friendship with John Prine.
Well, I can just say this about his kindness. John Prine made every part of my life better. You don't do that with not being generous or being unkind or being frivolous in a funny way, but not in a flippant way. That's the kind of person he was, and he just always was. And if he liked you, or if he liked making stuff up here, vanilla milkshakes or whatever it was, he never changed an iota about that, because he would go back to those people or those things or whatever it was his whole life long. And that's just his honesty, kindness, if you want to put it that way. It's just he was truly a beautiful person. I was living in New York City, down in the Village, and I got to meet Chris Christopherson down there one time. Chris came over to my table at the Kettle of Fish one night. I was having dinner, and I never heard of Chris Christopherson. This is probably 1970 or 71 or something around in there. This guy came over, long stringy hair, and just looked down at me and he's, "Are you Keith Sykes?" I went, "Yeah. I'm Chris Christopherson, man. I really like your album." I had one album out that time. And that's how I met Chris. And, as the months went on, he'd come into town and do things, and I'd meet back up. And I guess it was towards the end of the year, sometime in the fall. I can't remember exactly when, but he played a weekend that was a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And Friday and Saturday, he played the bitter end, which it didn't hold but 100 people probably. It packed to the rafters, but it was packed. Both Friday and Saturday, you just, you couldn't even get in. Changing sets, doing 2 or 3 shows a night. And on Sunday, it was relative quiet. And I went over there Sunday because the people that managed me that was their place. So I could get in anytime. And he said, "I brought a couple of friends of mine from Chicago over here. I want to get up and do a guest set, so welcome John Prine." And Steve Goodman was there too, and I swear I don't remember a thing. Because John got up and sang Donald and Lydia, Hello in There, and Sam Stone. And I just said, well, I quit. I mean, come on. What's the difference now? And so we met, and, we just met that night. And then a few months later, I was gone. The thing is so mysterious is I was gone 9 months of the year because I was on the coffeehouse circuit. So the whole time college was in, I played about 75 colleges a year back in those days because my management company owned the college coffeehouse circuit. That was their deal. So I was just working all the time. So, but anyway, I think John came in. That might have been when Chris was playing again or some other time. And we saw each other from across the room at the Kettle of Fish. I thought, I'm going to go say hi to him. And by the time I thought that, he was walking over towards me. So he remembered me, and I remembered him. Of course, I wasn't going to forget him. But we just started talking like we were old buddies. And that just kept going. And every time we see each other, get a little bit closer. And then we run into each other on the road and just different places. And just became friends. And, 15 years later, it dawned on us we'd never written a song. So, hey, you want to write a song? Yeah, let's do that. So that's when we started writing, was 1986. So that was 71 to 15 years before we even thought about writing a song. It never occurred to me because, there's John Prine, one of my heroes, and he became an instant hero. I mean, when I saw that night at the bitter end, it was just like, wow, and still is. But he always liked me and what I was doing too, which always blew my mind. And anyway, that's how we met. We were up there in this little room I'd rented, and he'd come around. We'd start to write it. And I had all this stuff, paraphernalia, publishing stuff, He'd pick up these old pitch sheets and stuff you get from the record companies and just around, who's looking at what, and, looking for something in the mid-tempo positive for so-and-so, And John was looking at one of those one day, and he just was reading it, and he looked up and he says, "I'd eat a dog for a hit record." I thought, okay, I'll pass that along to these producers. I'm saying, you got anybody that would like to eat a dog? No, but he had that kind of sense of humor, and it was just so deadpan and natural, and he loved telling jokes. He introduced me to Roger Cook, who I just loved his work and fell in love with him as soon as you meet, we're just one of those guys. But he loved to tell jokes, and he told them well, and so did Roger. So Roger told me this joke one time about this fly walks into a bar, and you can edit this out if you want to, and goes up to the bartender, and the bartender says, "What do you have?" And he says, "I want a nice little bowl of shit covered with chopped onions and big frosty beer." Bartender says, "Coming right up." So he brings him out, and the fly just really enjoys it, man, leaves him a big tip and says, "Thank you, brother, man." And he flies on out. Next day, comes in, orders the same thing, beautiful. So he comes in, that weekend, and the bartender sees him across the crowd and says, "Nice little bowl of shit, chopped onions, big frosty beer." And he says, "Oh, no, man, hold the onions. I got a date tonight." And so Roger told me that when we were off doing something. So next time I ran into John, I told John, and John added the bit about he was doing his hands like flies do, And so 2 years ago, and I saw Roger. I said, "Roger, I told John that joke, and he just loved it, man. He's been telling everybody." He says, "What joke?" I said, "The one about the fly." And he said, "I don't remember the joke about the fly." And so I retold it to him, and he died laughing. So that's how those things went along. One time we were out, when I lived in Memphis, he was staying with us for a week or a weekend or whatever it was. He'd come down to Memphis all the time, and I'd go up and spend time at his house. It's just the way it was in those days. He had a 50 Ford two-door that he loved, and it was a cherry apple red, and all this stuff. And the mirror on the thing, the bullet mirror that you turn like this and all, it had all those gizmos on it. And I had a 50 Studebaker that was just plain, and I didn't try to fix it up. I just wanted, it ran great, but the cosmetics were just everywhere off the map. People would sign the hood, And I had a great Roseanne Cash because she really signed the crap out of it. It was big, and I thought, that's really cool. But so we'd follow each other back and forth to Memphis and those old things and just had fun. We were sitting outside on my patio, and we weren't saying anything. It's just one of those days, probably 86 degrees or just something. Really, everything was just so comfortable. And he just looked at me and says, "Man, we're going to be a couple of boring old farts, ain't we?" I guess so, John. That's what we're destined to be all along. You may have seen this. It's a black guitar. It's got his name in big letters, John Prine. Okay. He was getting that inlay put in. And he went to this, he found a lutherer who was going to do it. And he's going over there and wanted to kind of be there when he did it. And he said, finally, the guy just sort of he said, "I'm going to have it done." He said, "It's okay. Well, I'm really working on it. I'm still working on it. I've got this other stuff to do, no, like that." And John says, the guy never really got the fact that I just wanted to go over and hang out with him. He just didn't seem to pick up on that. It's kind of like when I was there, I was sort of worrying him or something, And but I think only John would think in those kind of terms, His father took him and his brothers on a little vacation every year. I think he said he was either 13 or 14 the first time he went to John's boat dock. I mean, this same place that we go to. He started going up there when he was just a young kid, and I think that's the first place he played for anybody outside of his family. But he loved going fishing. Now, when I started going, it wasn't until 2012. I went up there one time before in the late 80s or early 90s. It was after I think it was before cancer or right after cancer or something like that. I was drinking pretty heavily in those days, and I didn't feel comfortable about being around that much family and showing all my cards. So I told Roger, man, I'm going to slide on back home. But in 2012, he played my show in Hot Springs, and then I went back home and got my motorcycle and rode it back over there, which he loved the fact that I rode my motorcycle up to Mountain View. And anyway, that's the first time. And after one of the years, he's saying he's getting all of his stuff together, and his buddy John Earl and him would drive over. And I mean, this They had a big SUV just packed. You couldn't get anything else in there if you tried. And he started just leaving a lot of the stuff at Brian's house. And he had a pretty big garage, so he could put stuff there. And then so he didn't have to pack it all the time. He'd just take it over the river and put it back in John's boat dock. But he loved doing that. But I can hear him say now, I was leaving, and Fiona says, "Don't forget your fishing pole." Because he had everything else. I don't know. I just loved him. It's easy to see when you're looking at me that I love John Prine. But wasn't it terrific? The love he got. Well, after he got back from cancer and went back on the road, that was astonishing, the way the people showed up. And then the last few years, say the last 5 or 6, 7 years, it just was, I don't know, the people, all the young artists, the country artists that were coming up, started all quoting John Prine songs. And what was it he said? He said, "I'm becoming a verb or a noun," or whatever it was, a verb, yeah, John Prine or Prine this or something. He was really proud of all that. But those kind of things where people like, I always said to Jareen or just anybody who listens, is people are finally putting John on the level I've had him at my whole life, since we met anyway. Because you look at those records, his best records, his worst record is really great. His best ones are just seamless, it's just a whole ethereal thing. How does that happen? But he did it on his very first record, which in hindsight, people say, "What would you do over?" And I say, I don't look back. But there is one place, if I'd have waited till I was 24, which is the age he was when he put his first record, rather than, I think I was 21 or something, or, if I'd had just a little bit more seasoning, maybe I could have done something that would have been on the bottom rung of what he did, Because he came out and, Arif Mardin produced his first album. He also produced Nora Jones' first album. That's just kind of a seamless, you just blindly put the needle down anywhere on it and it just pops out this magic, There's no holes or no seams or there's nothing. It's just this thing that goes all the way through. And to think about those songs and just coming out, on your first album, while digesting Reader's Digest in the back of the dirty bookstore, plastic flag with gum on the back fell out on the floor. Picked it up, wiped it off, and slapped it on my window shield. If I could see old Betsy Ross, I'd tell her how good I feel. Come on, man. It just doesn't get any better to relate what millions of people are thinking and being able to say it like that. A lot of the stuff you pick up it's like a Hallmark greeting card. Or Jerry Jeff used to say, "I love you more than God," or something like just, "You're so astonishing and so ethereal and so beautiful," all these words, and it doesn't mean anything. And you just put a few little sentences together like John did, and it means everything. I'm astonished every day when I think about his body of work. But
how did you hear about his passing?
Fiona called, and she, we knew he was sick. She called when he was sick, just to let some people know that his people, which I'm sure took a long time because he had a bunch of people, But happily, I was one of those people, and so it just, and then on the day he died, she called and, said he was gone. And anyway, it was a very sad day. It was sad when he got that stuff. And there was no vaccines, there was no boosters, nobody knew anything. It's just people got it, and before you knew it, they were in the thick of it. And people that really got that stuff, hardly anybody lived. And they said, it just takes old people and people who have all these pre-existing conditions and stuff. John, he had a lot of issues, but he was healthy. He's a horse. I mean, he'd tell you that. I feel great. I feel good. You know, I'm sure he had days when he was maybe fudging some. We all do. But that stuff was just too much for him. And how many ever millions and more. It's awful.
Were you on the fishing trip where they scattered his ashes?
I was. I think there's about 10 of us or so, you know. There's 2 guys that live up there that are just so beautiful, great people. Brian Holmes and Jim Ross. And they have boats. And great friends of John's. I met them both through John. But anyway, when John died, of course, we couldn't get together for a couple of years or something, but however long it was. And we finally got where we get up there, and we went up to, took the boat up the White River. It's a pretty good trip up there. I don't know how many miles it is or anything like that because it's on the water. And if you're going 30 miles on the water, it feels like you're doing 120 in a car or something. But we go up for a long way, and there's this place which I call the John Prine Grotto. And it's this, if you're heading up north, it'll be on your west side. And it just comes down this waterfall. It's just running all the time, and it's beautiful little palisade and mossy and rocks and just gorgeous. And you go through these trees that are falling down in this little tunnel to get up there to it. And we all went there and just sort of hung out, just thinking about John. And Brian's wife has given us all a rose apiece, 1 rose apiece. So when we left there, we went out to the middle of the river and just shut the engine off. There's 2 boats of us. And, or was it just, 2 boats of us. And and Roger Cook had a little plastic bag of John's ashes and put it in a little cup with a spoon, and we could all take a spoon and each scatter a little bit. And we said a little piece about John and did that. But we tossed the roses in first. And the roses just stayed with us the whole way, the whole trip back down to John's boat dock. They go way away, and then they come right up back to the boat. And they did that. And, it takes a pretty good little bit. It takes 30 to 45 minutes, I guess, to float down to see those roses come in and back. And we finally get out, and the river really gets wide there where we were going to stop. And that's what they went on. And but we all felt John. We all had a handsome Johnny that night eating. That's what was gin and tonic, or not gin and tonic. It's vodka and ginger ale. That was it. And the band started calling them Handsome Johnnies because every night after the show they'd have a little powwow and they'd, drink one, and so it was just I guess saying goodbye to John in that way. But man, I tell you what, I visit him every day, just about.